to restore the credibility of the station quickly, provided government is on board.
A yellow weather warning has been issued for heavy showers and thunder this afternoon. It's been issued for counties Cavan, Donegal, Monaghan and Clare, as well as all of Connacht and some counties in Ulster. Heavy downpours could lead to spot flooding in places, and along with thunder and lightning, some parts may also experience hail. That's your news. More in an hour.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Cheer on Cliona and the European Solheim Cup team with Ryanair's low-fare flights to Malaga in September.
Heavy showers across the country today with thunderstorms in places, highest temperatures of 17 to 21 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now you're welcome along. Sunday paper review. So I'll give you the back pages first of all. Limerick are everywhere. That's the short story. Sunday World here. Nuclear treaty. So again, it's Galway blown away as Galan's goals see Limerick book their place in the final. Limerick won by 9 points in the end, 224 to 118. And then United move on Onana as well. David De Gea announced his departure from the club over the weekend, and it seems that Manchester United are closing in on Andre Onana of Inter Milan. Back page of the Mail on Sunday, brilliant picture here of Conor Boylan and Mikey Casey having a big hug at full time. Beautiful day at Croke Park yesterday. Great pictures. Kylie insists Limerick have already secured their legacy no matter what happens in the All-Ireland final. They're already a great team, says John Kiley. Then we have a picture here, Keane Healy celebrating a point mid-game for Limerick. Glan's 2-goal blitz, too much for Galway, is the lead on the Sunday Independent. Similar on the back page of Sun Sport, A1 Aaron, Glan's 2 goals, his 2-6 in total, destroy Galway. And the word is that Declan Hannon could well make it for the final. He was absent yesterday, obviously through injury. Another picture, Sunday Times this time, of Keane Lynch, similar to the Sun picture. The dream is still alive is the headline. Limerick looking for a 4 in a row. And the lead story alongside that Keane Lynch photo on the Sunday Times, emotional David De Gea exits after 12 years at Manchester United, so 32 years of age, 545 appearances, and he's expressed his gratitude to the club. And then finally, the Mirror here has a picture of Diarmaid Burns and George Hegarty. 2 Man Mountains. Green Giants is the headline. What are they? 6'4", 6'5" each? I wouldn't like to stand next to them in that photo, put it that way. So 2 of them arm in arm posing for the camera after full time. 3 in a row champs stand tall at Croker, and now Hannon could make return for place in hurling history. Very happy to say we have Cliona Foley here in studio. You're very welcome back.
Thank you, Joe.
And Johnny Ward is here as well. Usually of a Saturday with John Duggan. We've dragged him in for a Sunday Papers.
We've a bit of time off. I don't think we're back till another 4 weeks maybe this weekend, and we all needed the break from each other, I think, and probably the listener needed a break from us as well. But it's been nice to, it's strange for me looking at clubs going back playing pre-season when you're literally just ended the season. And obviously I'm from the League of Ireland sort of narrative, so it's not off season, you're going into European football now, but the clubs that are playing in Europe who are in pre-season, it's all very strange that it's all happening again. No real break, but no break for Galway yesterday, Joe.
No, it was looking good obviously for the first 25 minutes, and then the remainder was 118 to 6 points.
Shane McGrath has a great line. When you're a writer, you love great writing, and the way we always say how hard it is to do match reports on the fly, but he does this brilliant farming analogy. He says the great green thresher, you're talking about how people are worried about them, the great green thresher looked to be, if not rusting, then starting to creak. Odd noises emerged from within the works. The old power might be dimming. On the most famous meadow in Irish sport, it roared and chewed and consumed all before it. It's a brilliant line.
Shane is great. I was funny you say about match reports. I was in Inchicore the other night for Pats and Cork City. Shamrock Rovers were drawn 0-0 in their game, so Pats were going to drop into a 2-point situation where they'd be 2 points off the lead. Derry City were level, so it was like a formality of a game. They were 1-0 up Pats, so I'd written my match report probably with about 15 minutes to go. I was like, if there's another goal, it'll be a Pats goal. So Pats have emerged as the big threat to Shamrock Rovers. This is, they now have 26 points from 11 games since John Daly took over, or whatever it was. Derry scored, and then Cork scored in the last minute, right? So I was like, if I had a deadline for the newspaper here, I was absolutely royally screwed. Like, I had to change everything, like top to bottom. The whole article, the whole message was wrong. Everything I said was wrong because of one goal. And Dan McDonald, I was texting about it after, and he was like, I bet you had your laptop like literally wrapped in the bag. And I looked down at my laptop in the bag, and I was like, the art of the match report when something late happens.
It is great. It's great when you see it done. Well done. It's beautifully done. But he just captured exactly what happened yesterday.
This was a match report that you could have written after 50 minutes as well. Like, I don't know. I was behind sort of Henry Shefflin, maybe 10 or 12 seats back that side of the ground, and it looked as if we weren't much different in that I was a spectator to this, unfolding massacre, and Henry looked as bewildered as I did. And maybe Galway didn't have the bench, but like when you'd Evan Nyland, there was one moment in the second half when Evan Nyland was literally like, it was like throwing a baby into a bunch of lions. He was absolutely swarmed, looked completely physically out of his depth, as did 3 or 4 of the Galway players. But it was strange looking at Henry. He just seemed like, I was like, is he not seeing this? Because this is a complete sea change. Galway were a point up at half time. It should have been 5 or 6, but it wasn't. And at the same time, like, we scored 3 points in about 25 minutes in the second half. Conor Whelan was completely out of the game. But it almost looked like Henry didn't know what to do. It was almost like he was completely, I can't do anything about this. And it was a strange sight to see, and it was bewildering because Limerick were amazing, but at the same time Galway's lack of response was somewhat sad actually to watch.
And it is like there's certainly bench strength is a huge factor as well, but to think that they're doing that without Hannon, without Sean Finn, they didn't have to dramatically rearrange things or whatever, but it's just their appetite. Even in those last minutes when they were leading whatever by 10-9 or whatever it was, they're still swarming around like savages. They are phenomenal.
And Shefflin said even the feeling at half time wasn't great. We're a point
because
up,
they didn't do enough. They should have put him. They should have put so much more on them.
So it hits off the hurl on the ground. And Limerick go down and get a point. So that was, instead of being I think 9 points up, we were 5. And then I felt for the first goal, I felt like I was right in front of it, and everyone on the ground around me thought that's a free out. But then you can't just exonerate Galway. So where is Shefflin now? Like in Derek Ling today, like I think that's kind of nearly a 50-50 game. Derek Ling could bring Kilkenny to an All-Ireland final, and Henry will have a lot to think about because that was, by Galway standards, to lose a game like that was fairly demoralising.
But the puck out strategy went to hell. I mean, that was the clear thing that was happening in the second half, and why he didn't adjust it quicker and play shorter earlier, that's what I just couldn't understand. But look, they are an awesome outfit, and it is going to take an awesome team to go anywhere near them at this stage. It's the reorganisation. It's you look over at Kinnerk and the sideline, and the boys are having a chat, and then suddenly, and I mean, there is references a few places today did Quaid deliberately play for time in the goal, what's going on there, but definitely after that little break they had suddenly started to organise themselves.
I'm sure he did, and I wouldn't criticise him for it either.
Not for the first time, they reckon, but definitely something went in, something was said, and suddenly, and for all he says, I let them sort, what did he say at the end? I let them sort it out themselves. I mean,
well, it's funny.
Nobody believes that.
I would know, but it's funny. I was trying to see what have they done something tactically here, and to my eye, I just couldn't see. Whatever Limerick did, I don't know what they did, but it did also feel like Galway, akin to a boxer, just threw everything at them.
It was just threw like everything. They did for 20 minutes.
And any team, even as good as Limerick, you kind of take a few blows and you sort of absorb them.
Yeah.
And then you take a deep breath, and Galway are a little bit punch drunk, and then you arm wrestle them, and it felt a bit like that.
I couldn't actually, we were maybe slightly closer to the sort of 45 on the side that Galway were attacking into the first half.
Yeah.
I couldn't see Conor Whelan in the second half. It was like as if they just moved to another pitch, and it was like you could see all the movement. The Galway were so good in the first half, fine Whelan all the time, right behind the goal by Cathal Mannion. What a goal! And you're like, I'm not sure many players would have gone for that, but you have the ability to. But in the second half, it was a car crash in slow motion. I was like, Jesus, is this actually happening?
Chris O'Connor has a good piece actually in the Sunday Indo today. Just on, he's looked at the statistics of it, and it's
Sunday
well worth, or Sunday Times rather, and he has that's well worth looking at, because I think he was saying that how little possession they had in the first half. Conor Whelan and Brian Kilcannon had 19 possessions, and the second half they combined 4. And that'll just tell you about the inability to get the ball into them, and the very opposite on the Limerick side. It's a good statistical analysis circumstances.
Did I see as well, I think Michael Dignan mentioned it certainly, and maybe elsewhere as well, just a few grumbles or let's just note, by the way, a certain disappointment that none of the teams this weekend did any media in the build-up to now still you get 60,000 through the door. Maybe it's not overly impactful. Let's not.
Well, it kind of has come up in pieces during the week. It was mentioned kind of all week, and just none of the semi-finalists did a media night, and that was the thing. Is before an All-Ireland semi-final in recent years, that would be traditional. They'd open the door and they'd bring a few players out, and that just didn't happen this year at all. So there has been some debate about it,
and yet still a great crowd.
But then there's the argument, and in the modern era, the argument is if teams and stuff are feeding stuff to their fans, and people go to the big matches, do you need it? I'd argue that you still do, but I'm probably a traditionalist and I'm a journalist, so I'd have it differently. Shane McGrath's a good piece today, because he's saying, this hand-wringing about kind of a media blackout, there's nothing new in it. Now he says, obviously it reached its nadir probably with Brian Cody's Kilkenny and Dublin, Jim Gavin under Jim Gavin, but he was saying there's still plenty to talk about, and actually one of the things he points out is concussion. John Fogarty did a good piece on concussion in the Examiner during the week, but actually I think there's very little discussion of concussion, like when you consider how many players and the importance of it, and Shane O'Donnell there today and coming out in recent years, that is something that hasn't been talked about. There's plenty of talk today obviously about football and the way the game is going, but there are other things to talk about. But I still like player profiles. There's actually a couple of nice ones today, even though you haven't directly, in the case of TJ Reid, not talked directly to him. It's possible, I sometimes think, to get the best pieces without talking to a player. But there's a nice piece with his brother Richie Reid, who obviously was put up for the Sundays, and I think Philip Lanigan in the Mail on Sunday probably has the best of them, but there's a nice piece with the brother today, and the same with Donald Keoghan from Meath. He's done a piece, and the problem with that is everybody gets the same access to the player, so you get very similar pieces, if you like.
I
but that TJ Reid piece is good, and you were talking about it earlier on.
I'm trying to find it here now, but the TJ Reid, I guess it opened up some aspects to TJ that I wouldn't necessarily have known. Just
this is his brother.
No, this is TJ's.
Well, no, that's the TJ piece is in the Sunday Times.
The Sunday Times.
Yeah.
Where
Richie's the brother. Richie's in quite a few of them. Yeah.
There was reference to. This is a piece by Michael Foley. Michael Foley is a brilliant piece in the Hill 16 that we'll get to as well. So
is this like a profile piece of TJ Reid?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. So he's 6 points this afternoon, moves him past Patrick Horgan as hurling's all-time leading scorer. Now, what if he got 5 points today, just for argument's sake? It would be quite interesting, because like the odds are Kilkenny might lose, but like he's 36 in November, the same age that Shefflin and Kerr retired, with a young family and a growing business. All the conditions are there for Reid to step away now, but how close does it feel to the end on a day like this, miles away? And there's some lovely anecdotes about when he came in to train, and he'd basically, the Kilkenny lads would all be kind of, before Kilkenny sessions got their stern face on, Reid was the one out early, lightening the mood, soloing downfield and striking points, commentating as he went. You can imagine Brian Cody looking at this. Brian would be laughing, the lads would be laughing, and he has this real, like, you wouldn't see it in his performance, because he's the ultimate, like, maximise my ability, maximise my career, left and right, mazing from frees, gym work, all that, but he's actually a bit of a messer, and there's a lovely piece about him. And one thing as well, which Michael referenced, which
Johnny, sorry, just they're killing me here. Will you speak into the mic a bit more, because you're actually gone the other way? Yeah.
One thing that I thought was interesting as well, the brand space that Reid occupies. In a list of the top Irish sports earners on Instagram recently, compiled by a betting company, Reid was the highest placed GA player at 9th. So he's a lot of brand kind of potential, and that's what like Cliona's getting to there. Like, if I actually feel it's unfair for management and for counties to muzzle their players, because
that was Dignan's point. He said, look, I got a gig on the Sunday game on the back of having a profile.
Exactly. And TJ Reid and like all these lads who, I mean, we'll talk about Conor McManus, but if Conor McManus in his mid-30s has given everything he has for Monaghan, I can't say that Monaghan or anyone in Monaghan can stop him maximising his own potential, because and again, Eamon Sweeney wrote about this last weekend, like the money that is being made by all sorts of people from the skills of GA players, that they can't capitalise on themselves.
The overlap. for instance. A change.
And a nice line in that actually about TJ Reid changed his grip. He changed from right-handed to left-handed or the other way around as a hurler. And and I've seen that, and you see brilliant players being able to do it, and they talk about how long it took him to change, and how the Kilkenny players thought he was a bit mad when he did it initially.
When he came to Kilkenny training first, he was like a little child, says Aidan Fogarty. It was like when you be out pucking ball off the wall. TJ might puck one over from the sideline and shout up for himself. And it's lovely because like where he stands in terms of the great players, he's obviously well up there, but he hasn't really regressed. I'm not watching hurling every day of the week, but I don't know if he's regressed at all in his mid-30s.
Well, no, and the piece as well is how his role has changed. So now, actually, he was saying just now in this end of his career, he's really turned into a provider in the last 2 years.
And finding pockets of space from his intelligence.
Vision is amazing.
Well,
but the piece with the brother is good as well. I think Philip Lanigan's is coming out of the shadows, and it's just how between the club, he started out as a goalkeeper, and how over the years he's changed, and he's filling in this, of course, a pivotal role for Kilkenny once Michael Fennelly went number 6. It's such a hard role to fill, and so just generally there are pieces there. You like to see them. I always like to see them. I think people like to know about people off the pitch. They like to know where they're coming from. There's that little nuggets about his personality that he used to be, so playful and everything at training.
Yeah, well, I do have to say, I like the idea now of the thought of TJ Reid, one of the great players of all time, commentating on himself.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I think that brings a certain deeper understanding to him. A change of tack totally. So quite a few of the Sundays are having their say on the football of last week, if we're sticking with the GA theme for a moment.
Eamon Sweeney is so
good. We'll come to that in a second.
I laughed out loud.
I'll come to him in a second. That's a more negative view, but on pages 8 and 9, for instance, here of the Sunday Independent, Tommy Conlon, the big two get their ducks in a row for final push, and Joe Brolly, we shouldn't be shocked. The Dubs have us in awe again. So I know you picked this out, Johnny. Joe Brolly here is basically saying, and he's putting a lot of it at the feet of Gilroy, for instance. He's saying the Dubs are back in a real way, and he references an interview, which I would really recommend as well, that Gilroy did on their Free State podcast. Pat Gilroy doesn't do many interviews. It was a great insight. Yeah. He told us, writes Joe Brolly, that he didn't leave the house for a month after the Startled Earwigs defeat to Kerry all those years ago, demonically working on radical reconstruction plans. Amongst other things, he drew up a list of 12 players who would never play for Dublin again. After consulting a friend about the list, he decided to relent, and he said 9 of those players went on to win multiple All-Irelands. He calls Gilroy the most overqualified water boy in the history of the game. And so basically he says of Dublin, a team that was boring themselves and their spectators to death, going backwards, sideways, tackling half-heartedly, refusing to take their men on, and generally squandering their great inheritance, has been brought back to life by the Gilroy defibrillator. Kieran Kilkenny against Mayo was dropped, and I have little doubt this was because of his recent habit of playing lateral, risk-free football. When he was brought on last Sunday, he was energised, magnificent, surging forward, tackling fiercely. And he says, just as Gilroy did with Bernard Brogan in 2011, he has electrified Kilkenny by leaving him on the bench. And again, he talks about Dublin first half. Half-hearted rubbish is what he calls it. But the second half, they suddenly emerged from their 3-year hibernation. A blitzkrieg was activated. And he says, watching them, I thought of my own inadequacies as a footballer, and it does not often occur to me that I may have inadequacies.
Well, I've got to say, no, I sent you that earlier, so I'm going to take ownership of rehashing that before you did. I mean, I don't know. Like
not one mention of Desi Farrell.
No, did he not mention him?
He did. I think there is a mention of him somewhere in it. Yeah. I thought there was a mention of him somewhere.
Or maybe that was another piece I read. Actually, that we should clarify that. Actually, that's an interesting one. Yeah, he said he called him like a Michelin star chef flipping burgers. That line from Brolly. I mean, I'm not on Twitter, but I was looking at some of Brolly's stuff on Twitter this week, and he's been busy on the RT stuff, and he's never not engaging Joe, because he's like I think he's such a complex character, Joe Brolly. And this is a really good piece, and that piece where he says it does not often occur to me that I have inadequacies. A lot of the stuff he says, like, I don't know if he means this or not, or if he's saying it entirely for reaction, because I do feel with Joe needs to be loved, or he certainly needs to attract attention, because otherwise, where does this last paragraph come from? I can't get my head around it. He goes, the return of Cluxton has had an enormous impact, which is massively true. And he says, relaxed as Big Pat Jennings, he sets the highest standards. His presence is a signal to the team that everything is going to be okay. He reminds me of the great Bill Russell line, my ego demands from me the success of my team, which is a great line. Russell won 11 NBA championships with the Boston Celtics and is widely regarded as the greatest captain in history. And this is the bit I don't get, right? Cluxton is on his way to equaling that record and nothing can stop him. That makes zero sense. So nothing can stop him is not true, because Dublin will do well to beat Kerry in a final if they get there this year. And if what's Cluxton on, 8? So does he need to get to 11? He's on the way to equaling that. So can anyone explain what Joe Brolly actually means there, or is he literally just doing this for me to be talking about him on the radio? Because that does not make any sense, and it was at the end of a brilliant piece. So I don't know what the answer to that is.
Maybe it was more the greatest captain in history.
You're right, actually. He does not mention Des Farrell. I hadn't noticed that he hadn't mentioned Des Farrell. Tommy Conlon does on the other side. Yeah. Tommy Conlon is in agreement that...
Can I just say, by the way, I think, to be fair, it doesn't occur to me that I have inadequacies. He's slagging off himself.
His tongue in cheek.
It's a brilliant line. I sent that to a load of people on WhatsApp, and I was like, I sent it. No, but it's the last line I don't get, the 11. I thought that was a great line. It does not often occur to me. But he's actually, it's tongue in cheek, but he's also kind of serious. He's like, that's
why it's funny.
He's so confident in himself, but it's not opposite. He must have had a smile at the laptop as he wrote that. He's like, that'll work, Yeah. So it's a great piece, and the stuff about Gilroy, it really is. The Blitzkrieg, I think, is apt as well, because where have Dublin been for the last 2 or 3 years? We didn't know, and then we did in 10 minutes against Mayo, where it's like, this is football played at its absolute best, and then maybe that brings us to the whole football debate, Cliona, because football, in terms of what Clifford did with that outrageous bit of skill, what Dublin did in the first 15 minutes, even the Derry goal against Cork, there's some brilliant moments, but a lot of it is utterly soporific at the moment, and that's the problem. And I don't know where we're at, but again, it's approaching some of the articles today.
But a few of them have it. Just before we leave the interview, Tommy Conlon is side by side with them, and he's basically saying the same thing as well. It's Kerry and Dublin, and he's not saying that as an insult to Monaghan, and he points that out. He actually says, do you remember that? He says, do managers still cut offending articles out on newspapers and stick them up in the dressing room wall for motivation? Vinnie Corey, the Farney gaffer, comes across way too rational for that kind of crack. Now, it was banty though, he said. But then he says, anyway, I go up to Clonas and pin it on the wall myself if I thought it would improve their chances one whit. Who wouldn't want to see the rank outsiders pull off the shock? Who wouldn't want to see a side of such consistent courage carve their names? Who wouldn't want to see Monaghan get the ultimate benediction of an All-Ireland final appearance? But he's saying, in his opinion, it's going to be Kerry and Dublin. That's the thing. But the quality of the football obviously has taken a bit of a hiding in recent weeks.
This is the debate, Cliona, right? So it's like, if a sport can't evolve naturally without rule changes, you kind of have to slightly question the sport. And say soccer, as we call it for the time being, brought in that you couldn't pass the ball back to the goalkeeper. Now, I remember being told that in Shivan Rovers training at under 13, and that was the first I heard, was you can't actually pass back to the goalie there. So I was this would have been 1993, would that be right? 1992, give or take. Anyway, so I was that's interesting. Can you imagine if that rule weren't brought in? It makes perfect sense. Look back in Italia 90, a lot of it is rubbish, it really is. But football now, if watching sport, sport is a great escape, but if watching sport makes you think about your own life in the middle of the game, it's not working anymore. That's a problem. It's doing exactly what it shouldn't, because Jesus Christ.
Are these good thoughts or bad thoughts?
This is it, often a bit of a mix, but it's if the ball is being passed forward and back, and Eamon Sweeney gets to this
the 32, those 3 minutes of last week,
which will go down as the worst sustained spell of football ever witnessed in Croke Park. Yet we should praise Derry and Cork rather than bury them. They did football some service last Sunday. Their huffing and puffing demolished the flimsy argument for leaving the game as it is. Now
he's sort of holding that game up as it'll be remembered
in nadir,
you watch Cork and Derry in 2023,
and Pat Spillane does as well. Yeah,
Cliona. Okay, do you want to say to Monaghan and And do you want to say to Monaghan and Derry's, really, like, these guys who are the coaches at the coalface of Gaelic football now, they're way more intelligent than I am. They know exactly what they're doing. If you're to tell Corey that you should like go toe to toe the next day against Dublin, or that Derry should basically go toe to toe against Dublin and expect to win the game, absolutely not. They have to play defensively.
Of course
so
not.
This is the problem.
But the argument last week was that two teams were doing exactly the same thing, and it was absolutely
and they felt
so boring. It was difficult to watch.
They felt it was the best way to win. But Martin Brenny wrote about this in the Indo during the week, and it was kind of like the line that they took out the day before to promote the piece was interesting. Would you bring a neutral to a Gaelic football game? And I was like,
yes, you would.
Sure I would, depending on the
yes, you would if it was the first half of the other game last week, which was sensational and which had loads of football. I was tweeting at the time saying, God, it's incredible what you do if you actually kick a football.
Football's never been better.
The second half of that that game wasn't great either. So like you can tweak the rules, and why not?
What do you do?
We always talk about this. For me, you can't bring the ball back over the halfway line once it goes over. That's the simple plain thing you could do. I think the hand pass thing, stopping them after a certain number, they can't get the ordinary rules. I think they've struggled with trying to do that. But I do think don't bring the ball back over the halfway line. That'd be a start.
Your starting full forwards can't leave the opposition half, right? So say if you brought the two of them in, if I lose the ball, if I go into the opposition half, I can't come back out. Yet there are three defenders marking David Clifford and AL back here. Yeah. So that puts me in big stuck here. So just those two little tweaks. But I do wonder, I do think as much as the GA is an amazing organisation, I think it's really, really struggling with this, because football is still an amazing game played well, but it doesn't seem to be very watchable a lot of the time now.
Well, yeah, and you get rid of the forward mark obviously as well, because that's a nonsense, and that really does take a lot of good attack and play out of the game. I think it's just killing the game. Look, the point is your point is, do you have to keep changing the game to make it better? Yeah, I think that's okay, but don't be overly changing it. There's a load of things they did that I think were rubbish, so I don't think that makes sense.
I don't know. I can see see downsides to almost every suggestion.
There's always an up and
like
down.
Even your one, I see where you're coming from, but then my fear is if a team knows that you can't go back into your own half, then it's 15 behind the ball, and then you're
exactly. That's the potential.
It's not if your three full forward line can't.
You can't bring them back. You'd have to make
it would probably just by those two things would probably just make it a more sort of traditional game. Like Pat Spillane writes about it. This is a very typical Pat Spillane. For the first time, I will begin my column with a reference to the Book of Revelation. Good book to find the apocalypse as the complete and final destruction of the world, which may be pending in Gaelic football and otherwise. What happened in the Roscommon Dublin game was the first warning, and that was Dublin keeping the ball. And remember how close Roscommon pushed Dublin.
Yeah.
The end did justify the means for Davy Burke, but it's not watchable.
So he says, we'll round off this chat because I know we've talked about it a few times in the review, and I want to get to this Hill 16 piece, which is interesting. But he said he watched Man and Armagh, he hated that, and then he finally reached breaking point watching Derry Cork. So him and Eamon Sweeney were of a similar situation of mind. He says, Pat Spillane, I consider myself a mild-mannered individual, but after the first 3 minutes,
I said that with a bit of irony as well.
I wanted to drive my boot through the screen. This is not football, it's a new sport called keep ball. So the same criticism, 55 hand passes in 3 minutes, 34 of which went sideways or backwards.
What about this though, Joel? Take Cork. If this is true, and I have no reason to say it isn't, in the first 17 minutes they had 80% of the possession, but they scored 1 point.
Yeah, they only had 3 points by the half hour mark.
Crazy. I was watching it, and I watched that first 3 minutes and thought somebody kick. Eventually they kicked the ball and it was wide. Eamon Sweeney gets upset about it because he lives in West Cork and he's watching a lot of those players, and his point he's making is they're actually really good footballers. They can kick points, they can elude opponents, they can do all those things. He's also seen their manager John Cleary saying sending out teams to play in the best adventures traditions of the game, but now they're being ground down by the murder machine of modern inter-county football. But he did have one line that cracked me up, but he's saying also some of the analysis is sort intriguing, of praising this kind of keep ball thing, and he's just cracking me up. Accentuating the positive in such circumstances can make you sound silly. Paul Flynn's constant declarations in the Mayo Loud game that the home team had a great opportunity to work it out to the sides, then back into the middle and then off the shoulder made him sound like a Peter Mark stylist gone rogue. But it is unbelievably frustrating, and I often think as well, it must be frustrating for players as well, that we're building such a system now, and it's in the women's game as well, where it takes out the flair from the game.
The other thing is I'm not quite as down as other people in that. Like the Monaghan Armagh game for me is so tight and so compelling that you're looking for this little gap to happen. I've watched great 0-0 draws in football, like great 0-0 draws where I've absolutely mesmerised by it. A 1-0 game in soccer can be amazing. Yeah. So it's not like soccer is that much different, and Joe Brolly speaks about this a lot, where it has become the custom now in Gaelic football games for much of it just for the crowd to be having a conversation, and I've completely noticed that. You'd hear it in the crowd where like there's no atmosphere because the ball has been passed over and back, but like in football, a lot of like modern football, as far as I'm 40 now, a lot of watching football, there might be a goal here or there in 90 minutes, so it's not like we can't be mesmerised by sport, but
absolutely not. And great tact, and I've often come out of a J match and said, oh my God, that was brilliant. People said, are you mad? There wasn't enough score. And I've gone, no, but it was incredibly interesting tactically.
As long as it's close.
30 hand passes over 3 minutes.
Not for you.
That's not football, I'm sorry. It's basketball, and I love basketball.
Okay.
It's not football.
The biggest worry I'd have, Joe, actually, sorry, just on the end of this, the biggest worry I have, if the two semi-finals are absolute massacres, and say that the spreads from the bookies are 3 and 6, so but if they are, football might be boring for some people, but if it's a close game, it's a close game. If we have a situation where Tyrone are absolutely massacred by Kerry and Dublin, by Derry, and you see what Dublin did last weekend, that's not watchable either. Like that, the last 20 minutes of that game is not watchable either. That's a worry for me, in that the elite are so good.
Well, we'll come back to it, I suspect. We'll take a very short break. Cliona Foley and Johnny Ward are staying with us. We're coming next to Mick Foley's piece on the future of Hill 16.
The Sunday Papers
on Off the Ball. Alive and Kicking with Claire McKenna.
This week on the Alive and Kicking podcast, Cormac Ryan on how a health issue ended his GAA career, moving on from an eating disorder, and his unique take on how he lives life.
It's very easy in modern day Ireland to get caught up in career, mortgage, job, push, when there's a whole other world out there for us to see.
Alive and Kicking.
Catch the Alive and Kicking podcast at newstalk.com or on the Newstalk app, powered by Go Loud.
Newstalk. Conversation that counts.
If you run a business, here's an offer you can't miss. Switch to Air Business today and get Ireland's best value business broadband for our new lower price of just $34.99 a month. For more, visit air.ie/business, go in store or call 1-800-207-407. Air, Ireland's #1 business broadband provider. Subject to availability. Offers available to new Air Business broadband customers. Pricing excludes VAT. #1 broadband provider based on Comreg market share. For full terms, see air.ie/business.
It's the summer of savings at SuperValue. Enjoy great offers like Velvet Classic Quilted Toilet Tissue 24 roll, only €10. Ariel Powder and Fairy Non-Bio Powder 50 wash, only €10. Selected Wolf Glass Eagle Hawk Wine, only €8. And money off vouchers every week on the app. For a summer of savings, it's got to be SuperValue. Enjoy alcohol responsibly.
What makes us love our county so fiercely, despite all the summers of hurt? What lifts us back up year after year after year? What stirs such passion in our hearts and brings us out in our thousands? It's something intangible, deep in our veins. It's our county. It's our people. It's in our blood. AIB, the toughest. Proud sponsors of the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship.
From fuss-free hotel breaks to luxury Mediterranean escapes, make it a summer to remember with Go Breaks. We can't guarantee the weather, but we can guarantee amazing value hotel deals for every budget. Search gobreaks.ie and check out hotels across Ireland and Europe from just €115 per night. Go on, go for it. And go experience, go explore with Go Breaks, as recommended by Newstalk. Go Breaks. T's and C's at gobreaks.ie.
They're 100% fresh, they're 100% Irish, and Supermax fresh chicken tenders are 100% delicious. But don't take my word for it. Get down to a Supermax and try some. Go on, you know you want to.
Supermax serves 100% Irish chicken, always fresh, never frozen, and none of our competitors can say that.
Tasty and tempting food at Supermax.
I'm not the kind of person who wants to sit in a metal box. I don't want to slowly die in traffic. I want to ride a motorbike. And I want to keep riding a motorbike. I don't want to suddenly die in traffic. I'm not the kind of person who wants to lie in a wooden box.
Biking is a joy. Don't let it kill you. A third of bikers who have died on our roads were speeding, so ease off the throttle and keep within the speed limit. From the Road Safety Authority.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now then, you're very welcome back. So we have Cliona Foley and Johnny Ward taking us through the Sunday papers. Mick Foley has an interesting piece on page 16 of the Sunday Times. It's not page 16, excuse me.
You have the Sunday Times, Cliona. I mean, we're
Times.
Oh, I have it here, sorry.
I'll give you the gist here. So there was trouble, obviously, it's on page 5. Don't know where I got page 16 from. On the Hill last weekend between Armagh and Monaghan supporters. A fight, I guess. Now, I don't think it's been the most horrific thing you've ever seen, but there were 7 people arrested and another 16 ejected from the ground. And Peter McKenna, who's the stadium director, said to Mick Foley, the message to supporters really is they have to self-regulate. A lot of the supporters that go to Hill 16 are usually sensible. The crowd getting regulated by itself is by far the best way to deal with trouble. And that's how it's worked over the last 20 years or so. So it's just a really interesting piece. I mean, he goes through, it's had its moments. 1984, there was a Tyrone-Dublin match, and Tyrone warmed up, a precursor to Mayo in 06. They warmed up in front of the Hill. It all kicked off on the Hill that time around. And then back in the late 90s, it was interesting that there were concerns over safety. There was a Phil Scratton who had written a book about Hillsborough. He did an assessment of the Hill and felt it was not up to scratch at all, and talked about a steep grass bank behind the terrace with few stairwells, deemed a potential disaster zone. And it looked at that stage like the Hill might go, and obviously that was very much the mood in Premier League grounds as well around then. But 1999, this is pretty funny, on board Planola ordered the demolition of the Hill, and so the 99 Leinster final, Dublin fans put up a poster saying "Save our Hill," and then at the All-Ireland semi-final, Meath played Armagh, and the Meath fans held up a sign saying "Demolish the Hill." So what changed?
And actually, one of the things, Joe, is, and it used to be such a brilliant feature of games at Croke Park, was when people used to bring in big banners and things. And then with the safety, you see, they had to take away all the poles and all the rest, and all that went out the window.
I'd say people whose view was blocked are thrilled, by the way. Put down the bloody umbrella. Get rid of the flag. I want to watch the game. But anyway, what happened was in 03, the GAA managed to convince on board Planola that their new design would be a safe, modern terrace very far removed from the crumbling relics and death pens of the 80s. So in the 20 years since, any calls for permanent seating have pretty much disappeared. And that's true. You never hear anyone saying that about the Hill. The current Hill was finished in 2004. Roll on another 19 years and there are no plans to shift a single pebble. The concrete has a 50-year guarantee and the steel gets stress tested regularly and hasn't shown an ounce of weakness. And interestingly, as stadia across the globe drift cautiously back towards safe standing, the Hill might even be about to become on trend again. But, and this is the point as of last week, there is always risk, and even if most of the crowd standing on the Hill pass their time at a game like any normal spectator, any place packed with people is always a couple of wrong moves from disaster. If that happens, the Hill is gone. McKenna said, it doesn't take many troublemakers to take that away. And Mick Foley concludes by saying everybody has a stake in ensuring it never comes to that. And I think there is great affection for the Hill and people love safe standing, and I think we're seeing in recent years safe standing is definitely very possible. So you hope what happened between Armagh and Monaghan remains what I think most people see it as, which is like the minority of minorities.
It was pretty much unprecedented, though. I have never seen anything like that.
Or certainly in
recent years.
Pre-mobile phones.
Yeah, in recent years. Yeah, it was very unusual.
Yeah, it was great. It was horrible to see it, wasn't it? You thought, come on, don't be at this in GAA of all places. You know, it's one of the great traditions. Everybody sits side by side.
Yeah, you can't bring these lads down from Ulster. You know, they're mad. Like, you know,
that is a joke for the record.
I do think people from Monaghan Armagh probably felt a bit of this, like, you know, us lads down in Dublin talking about the lads coming down and kind of resenting it a bit, because I always think like the likes of Monaghan are driven by the fact that they're a county that just punches above its weight so often, and
gets patronised.
The border counties,
not literally though.
Not literally, but it's. I think Mick Foley, I love him as a writer. I was just saying to Cliona when Mick brought out the book on on Bloody Sunday, wasn't it?
Yeah, brilliant book.
And I was minded of, I think it was in Dublin Castle, Mick was doing a talk on the book, and he spoke about, and he like so vividly described Bloody Sunday that day, and kind of that brought me back to that, because this piece is obviously about the Hill, which is an absolute anachronism, let's be honest. If you brought somebody from that goes to sport, modern sport, and he or she looked at the Hill, they're like, did they not finish it? What's that doing?
Well, he does quote John Inverdale commentary a couple of years ago, and and Inverdale basically, I don't think he meant it in a bad way, but he said this was when the rugby must have been there. He said, now the next step for Croke Park will be to replace Hill 16, and then this is a bit patronising. In keeping with a country, accelerating through the Premier League of Europe, it would have arguably one of the finest grounds in the continent. So he was very much of a, why didn't they finish it?
I was watching the other night. There was a bit of an act about Flann O'Brien where he's like, a man becomes part bicycle, like when he's on a bike so long, and when you're standing at a game, it's like, I've always found this on the terraces when you're standing, you're almost like an extension of the action. You're part of it. You're participating. When you sit down, you're a spectator.
That's right.
And I've always felt that. And I actually can't remember when I was last on the Hill, but like I was always, I always loved standing at games. And there's no doubt it's a far better atmosphere when people stand. And I think you can see it in the German grounds with the safe standing like that. It just creates a better atmosphere. And I'm glad that you see like Hillsborough was so catastrophic, but that Hillsborough wasn't alone down to terraces. It was there was so much more going on, and that sort of changed everything in Britain, such that the atmosphere at British grounds isn't that great now. A lot of people are, everyone is sitting down, a lot of day trippers and all that, and I would stand by the Hill all day long, and I think it's a lovely piece from Mick, and he goes into the kind of the history of it, and even things change. Remember, my father was telling me, like, Galway and Limerick 1980, I think was that game, they were sitting on the wall at the back of the Hill, sitting on it, like, so if you fell down, you were falling like about 2 kilometres.
Like, people sitting on the roof of the Hogan.
Phenomenal photos,
and
they're amazing when you see them. It never happened there.
That 84 game, like, you see one of the players here, I don't think the player's name, but like one of the players, you can see that he has a physique that would certainly not wouldn't be consistent with inter-county footballers of nowadays. So things change, and the Hill has changed for the better. And I, for one, hope that, unlike those Meath supporters imploring in 1999, they never demolished it.
And you can see we've got the Camogie quarter-final on at the moment. Cork in control 2-8 to Kilkenny's 1-7. You can see, I mean, it looks, it hasn't filled up yet, so you can see the steel railings, you can see there's only 2, 3, 4 steps and then another steel railing, so like any kind of crush is safeguarded against. It's very safe, and in this increasingly homogenized world where everything just feels the same and every stadium feels the same,
it just makes it unique.
Unique games to have this unique. They haven't finished it. We could have finished it. We've elected to it gives it
Schoolboy End in Lansdowne Road years ago was exactly the same for Rugby International. We used to go in and you'd all be in together. It was brilliant,
both on TV and when you're there. It gives the stadium such personality there.
And say now, like, so you get seats in, like, I was in the Hogan yesterday, so you know who you're sitting by, whatever. In 1998, we started, like, the Montpellier School and the Tech, we started organising, it wasn't me now, we started organising buses to the games. It was almost as if Galway in 1998, because we were in Carrick-on-Shannon and we went to Castlebar for the first game, it was almost as if there was, even though Galway hadn't won All-Ireland since 66, there was almost this expectation this actually could happen for us this year. So, but we went along, and I'll never forget, like, being on the Canal End in the 98 final, and Mairead Meehan was beside me, the late Mairead Meehan from that unbelievable Meehan family from Caltra, one of the most beautiful people, passed away too soon. And I remember, and maybe my memories kind of exaggerated the story with time, but I remember I started a chant in the second half, like, Galway, one of these things, and Ray goes, geez, fair play to Johnny, we need a chant, we need to get the lads going in the second half. But you went immediately where all your friends were, so everyone was in, like, I looked around, there was Mairead Meehan, there was people from Montpellier, from Ballygar, from Newbridge, we were all there, even though I was 15 years of age, in this, like, concrete jungle that was just so amazingly atmospheric. And I'll never forget that vibe of being in this mystique of being in Croke Park at the Canal End full of Galway fans, and the noise and being beside your friends, because now you're just like you're somewhere in the ground in a seat.
Yeah. Did it take you long to come up with the chant, or
it was? I think it had been 15 years in the wait, and it went Galway.
No, it's very good. Very
and
good.
It went on and on and on. And then at the end of the game, I went on the pitch and I took some of the grounds and I put it into this little plastic kind of container and I brought it home and I told my school principal, and he's like, you've actually committed a crime there.
Desecrated,
you've desecrated Croke Park. That's disgraceful. And for I'd say 3 or 4 years, I remember doing my leaving certs in 2 or 3 years later, and that turf was still on the window from Croke Park.
Can we just, because we've about 7-8 minutes before we take an ad break, so I don't want to start something too in depth, but I think John Green's piece is very interesting, and it's a short piece. You'd blink and you'd miss it on the left-hand side of the Sunday Independent, page 14. Basically, and this is really important in a real way, as opposed to all the stuff we often get caught up in. So there's a sports capital programme. There's a new round of funding happening, and so the Minister Thomas Byrne is talking here, and basically it's highlighting, I think, what we've all said down the years and what we all know, but it's that soccer in this country. It's football and GA in my house. That was what we played, football and GA. But soccer is underrepresented when it comes to not just the money handed out, but also in the applications. So in this round of funding, the government is going to hand over 150 million to any project around the country. And so Minister of State for Sport Thomas Byrne is making the point, soccer clubs need to apply. And some of the stats here are amazing. So, yes, here's the point. This sums it up. You take the last 3 rounds of funding, and so there's 150 million up for grabs this time around. So we're presuming it's close to $500 million if you're adding up the last 3 rounds. If you take the last 3 rounds, the GAA has put its hand out. I don't know if it's got it all, but it looked for almost 200 million. So the GAA went and said, we want 200 million across these 3 rounds. Soccer put the hand out for 73 million. That's what they actually applied for, said Thomas Byrne. And so he wants to get the message out, and we're talking about working class areas who might not be as in the habit of engaging in these kind of funding programs to get organised, and the FAI are trying to push it as well, and to say, apply for the money. And I'm sure the government have to go and meet them halfway. But it's stark, I think, Johnny, and you've talked about this issue down the years about the lack of funding for what is such a core sport in this country. There is no doubt it's under supported, and yet there's also this unfortunate sense it hasn't put its hand up itself.
And that is about. I often say that is because it's nearly a lack of education in how to apply for funds. Like you need people who are really good at this kind of stuff. That's why we saw there have been big question marks over it. That's why you do see sometimes funding going to sports, and you go, how do they get that big lump of money? And I think they're really good at. They know what they're at, and they've got people who are really good at filling out forms.
To that point, I remember a couple of years ago, it blew up because in Shane Ross's constituency,
in the
hockey
hockey
pitch.
Exactly, that's the one I'm thinking of.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember the point made. Well, professional classes in that area, they know how to maneuver and work the system. Yeah.
Greater transparency around the programme. This is just in the general scheme of things, including a simplified marking scheme and an appeals process, has reduced criticism of political interference in the awarding of grants. Last year, every valid application received something, and 108 out of 146 appeals against applications being ruled invalid were also successful. I think this is a great piece by John Green. I think we can, sports in newspapers right now is in a place of real crux, because match reports are all online after the game. You have to come up with fresh stuff that people can read and talk about in shows like this. This is a great piece, and it strikes at my local club at home that I mentioned, Shivan Rovers. We've a great facility. John Delaney came. He probably, I don't know, did he open the ground, but he came back to the bar afterwards. The local
Was there
ground.
a giant check for the program?
I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I think our club knew how to play the game, and our club knew they got great facilities. Shivan Rovers is a brilliant example of a rural club that's done very well.
And even isn't play the games the wrong term? It's just to look out for yourself.
Exactly.
And to know how to do it.
But I think the problem with football in this country was that it was dysfunctional, and it's been dysfunctional for so long that clubs probably didn't really know what to do. And if you have the old FAI from the top down, the way it was run, and we felt it was okay to just send all our best kids to England and just get rid of them and never work in facilities and always live off 1990. Football was just in a place where it's a lot of insecurities and a lot of kind of not really knowing what to do, and almost feeling that we were second rate as well, in the sense of like the League of Ireland, our professional league, wasn't great. Not many people really go to watch football or soccer games week to week at non-league level compared to Gaelic games. It's not as rooted in a lot of communities, and I'd hope we're emerging from that kind of shadow now.
And one of the points John makes in this as well is that one of the requirements in these funding things as well is that anybody seeking a grant has to make sure that the grounds then are equally available to male and female, and we know this is a breaking point or an argument. A big problem in the GAA is because it's just difficult for women to get access sometimes, because traditionally men were there first, and there's such a huge number and volume of them. But part of this thing is they must make sure that all of the facilities are equally available to men and women. That's a massive thing.
Yeah, it is. You can't get your dressing room and build it, but it's male only dressing room. You're not getting that money. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Maybe they should bring stuff in the GAA where this is the one thing I don't like about the success of that. The one thing I'll take away from the likes of Monaghan in football or Kilkenny in hurling. Where are your hurlers in Monaghan? Where are your footballers in Kilkenny? Because hurling is the one sport that really, really needs to finally get proper cross-country representation. It hasn't, and this is the one thing that the GAA still just haven't knacked that. How do we actually sort this out where we get these sports played at every level across the country? Because Kilkenny are great at hurling, but show me your footballers, lads. What are you contributing to that game?
Yeah.
Whereas in Galway, we'd like to think that we're good at both until the second half of yesterday.
Not too much time to get into it. It's worth mentioning the Sunday Business Post profiles the new Saudi League, which is
I thought that was an interesting piece.
Taking Stephen Gerrard. So
we have till 3:30. Or
no, we do. But we'll talk Vera Pauw afterwards and a few other stories afterwards. I just have to go to an ad break for news very shortly. But it's taken Benzema and Ronaldo and Firmino and Kante and now Stephen Gerrard, and it's wondering, China tried this and failed. Is Saudi going to do a touch better? And John Aldridge in the Sunday World, he's basically saying, look, does Saudi Arabia have questions to answer? It sure does. Does Tory Britain have questions to answer over its immigration policies and lots of other issues? Yes, it does. Should we be on our high horse? I'm not so sure we should. And why would you begrudge these players going and topping up their pensions, as rich as they all are? Would you move to Saudi Arabia for 4 times your wage, he asks.
I was saying this during the week on OTB AM, and you can take Aldo out of Liverpool, but you can't take the Scouser out of Aldo and that stuff he's saying there about the Tory government. And we have massive issues in the West, and we're totally wrapped up in the Western narrative where we're great, and but what about what did Britain and all these great European countries do to Africa down the years in terms of the imperial project? And what happened in Afghanistan? Was that fine? Just murdering innocent people? What happened in Iraq? So a lot of people in Britain, Saudi Arabia is terrible, we're great. So it's not as simple as that. But at the same time, I mean, how can you not, at a time when, and I don't want to go over this again, but at a time when, the climate is literally unraveling and collapsing because of oil, because of fossil fuels, it's almost like a sick joke that Saudi Arabia is now trying to flex its muscles, because effectively you have a bored dictator in Mohammed bin Salman who wants to do stuff like create sport in Saudi Arabia, a country where it's regularly, it's not fit for humans at the moment. It's 45 degrees every day of the week. How do you play football there? And at the same time, now you have people going over for money. And I find it quite sickening, but it is what it is, and Saudi Arabia nearly took over Galway United, so it could have happened in Ireland, and it doesn't seem to show any sign of stopping, and it's pretty sad.
Ironically, their spend is to prepare for a post-oil world, which
which may not exist
on the horizon.
The piece it's a good piece. I thought it was an interesting piece. The Sunday Business Post traditionally never did sport, and now under its new ownership and that, it does 2 pages of sport every week.
Even give me an odd article nowadays.
It's a great development, actually.
But I actually like to see it because so much of sport is about business. I've always argued that they should have covered it. This is a piece for Richard Fitzpatrick, and what he's saying is that there's nothing stopping the Middle East from becoming a global sports powerhouse. But he's saying, if you look at China, he also cites the way that India, really monetized and has been so successful with cricket.
I was amazed at the numbers in that.
And so that's what he's saying. He's saying it doesn't always work. you know. It's interesting that in China it didn't work with football, but you know, look at it, they've such massive resources. But like, it does give that good example of the Indian Premier League, which is so massive. Like, it's run off so fast. It's like a sprint. That's exactly what he calls it. They do it between March and May. And this year, for example, the live streaming was 32 million. It earns approximately $13.4 million a game.
That blew my mind, actually.
Yeah, but
I'm aware of the volume, but
volume is huge.
He says only American football commands more media rights per match. So if you're looking over at the Indian Premier League, they're making 13 million a match. 32 million streaming the final was a world record. And the Saudi Pro League, for context, it's about 50 something in like the global. Where's the Irish League? Do you know?
Well, like in terms of Europe, I think we're sort of 33 or 4. Okay. It's not bad. It's improved.
Well, Saudi is 50 in the global power rankings. So the Japanese J1 league, for example, is about 20th. So that's kind of your benchmark.
It was Richard Fitzpatrick that wrote the piece, and this stuff, I mean, like, we'll have to come back and talk about the Premier League soon and talk about how the great football is, but you can't escape from, you know, the prevailing sort of narrative of where the clubs are going. I thought this was interesting as well. And he speaks about Live Golf, obviously. Says in football there are several regulatory questions that have to be answered. The new ownership model of the Saudi Pro League's top teams contravenes both FIFA and Asian football's governing bodies' rules about the same owner controlling multiple clubs in the same competition. PIF, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, invests in several private equity firms, including Clear Lake Capital, as well as managing billions of dollars of assets for the Gulf state. Clear Lake owns Chelsea. Last month, Chelsea offloaded several players to the Saudi Pro League, Koulibaly and Mendy. The London club struggles to meet financial fair play regulations for next season. Hakan Ziyech's move collapsed at the last minute because of a failed medical. Do these deals mark a coincidence marked by close ties, or is it a conflict of interest?
We did a piece on that with Matt Slater. He'll explain why he thinks it is a coincidence, but you're not the first person to say, well, would it be against Saudi interest to keep Clear Lake's investment in Chelsea of value? We've got to take a short break. We have a few more pieces to get to. We'll do so on the far side of the news headlines. The latest in the Camogie quarter-final. It's after tightening up, just a goal in at Cork 212, Kilkenny 112. So 3 points between Cork and Kilkenny, 50 minutes on the clock. That's an All-Ireland Camogie quarter-final.
Stay up to date at News Talk FM on Twitter. We've got the news you need to know. News Talk. Conversation that counts.
InsureMyVan.ie. Hi, I'm Ken Doherty. For all van drivers and business owners, InsureMyVan.ie is Ireland's low-cost van and commercial insurance specialist. For high-quality van and all commercial insurances, call InsureMyVan.ie.
City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Galway International Arts Festival presents the show of the summer. This July, see the unmissable show, The Pulse, a phenomenal production that features a cast of over 60 in a spectacular, gravity-defying, jaw-dropping performance. You have never seen anything like The Pulse. Prepare to be astounded. Book now at giaf.ie.
Maialar an bheus an reachtaíocht maidir le banistú dravile gno, ní mór de gach baile hor dravile trí bhosca brúscart a chur fáil dá gustamí gnoanis. Chun achorsáil dravile orgánach agus dravile generalta a scara, agus gach customer a chur flean práisála drasia. Curí de baile hor dravile tilla cóla fáil maidir na harria tábhachtacha seo. Teachtacht ó My Waste. Ar na thuirtugad ag rialtas na Héireann.
Bosch, appliances you can rely on. For peace of mind, choose from Bosch's 5-year warranty range of home appliances. For more information, go to paracity.ie. T's and C's apply.
You've imagined the car journeys you'll take, from meeting old friends to visiting the folks to just getting away on new adventures. Now it's time to bring your plans to life with a new car. With a car loan from Permanent TSB and online approval in minutes, you can stop imagining your journeys and start taking them. Apply for a car loan at permanenttsb.ie today. Online approval in minutes applies to current account salary mandated customers registered for online banking for loans up to €25,000. Lending criteria, terms and conditions apply, subject to affordability assessment. Security may be required. Permanent TSB PLC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Go full Lidl and bag even bigger savings with XXL packs. Like 20% extra on XXL Board B approved diced chicken fillets, $3.79. There's a cool 20% off XXL premium ice cream cones, only $1.69. And a bloomin' 43% extra on XXL German eye flowers, only $1.99. Go on, shop without compromise. Go full Lidl today.
On 106 to 108 FM, on the News Talk app, powered by Go Loud and smart speakers. This is News Talk.
It's a hate crime. It is a crime, and I hope the police have managed to do some evidence gathering, and if they have, I hope they threw the full weight of the law at the people responsible for it.
An incident that led to major disruption on the Cork to Dublin railway line earlier has been dealt with. However, Irish Rail says significant delays are likely for a while as train services resume. It's advising anyone travelling to matches at Croke Park this afternoon to seek alternative methods of transport. Irish Rail's Jane Cregan has the latest.
The line has reopened at Portlaoise at 12:17. Services are back operating between Houston and the south of the country. There are some residual delays as a result of train sets being misplaced, so some delays are expected.
Gardaí are searching for a missing man in County Mayo. 18-year-old Sebastian Palma Sigmund was last seen in the Dwa area of Achill at around 5 o'clock on Friday evening. He's around 5'9" in height with short black hair and brown eyes. Meanwhile, an appeal has also been made to help find a missing man from Sligo. 22-year-old David Slanina was last seen at his home in Grange on Saturday. He's 6'2" with dark brown hair and brown eyes. Anyone with information on either man's whereabouts is asked to contact Gardaí. Finally, for now, the UK Culture Secretary has spoken to the BBC Director General about claims an unnamed high-profile presenter paid a teenager for explicit images. Lucy Fraser says she's been assured the corporation is investigating swiftly and sensitively. Some major BBC personalities have denied involvement, saying they've been falsely accused on social media. Media law consultant Ian Bloom says the corporation needs to act.
At the moment, the pressure is clearly on the BBC to do something and to do something quickly. The rumour mill on the internet is in overdrive, and every possible presenter is being suggested. That's intolerable for all of them, who are not the one in question.
And that's your news, Matt. 2 minutes past 3.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Rain, go away. Summer hauls are just one click away with Ryanair's low-fare flights to Greece, Italy and Spain.
A mix of sunny spells and heavy showers this afternoon. Top temperatures of 17 to 21 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Welcome back. We're going through the Sunday Papers. Very happy to say Cliona Foley and Johnny Ward here in studio. We've talked lots of GAA, a bit of Saudi Arabian football. We've talked sports funding. We should touch on the fact, and it's across the papers, that the Republic of Ireland are about to embark on a World Cup. It's been a complicated week for Vera Pauw in that the Athletic spoke to 4 players, 3 coaches from her time at Houston, and so this was along similar lines to what was said in the report which was published by the Women's National League in America back in December. So on the Wednesday press conference, the night before the match on the Thursday. The guts of it was Vera Pauw taking questions for maybe 30 minutes about the nature of that report. Katie McCabe showed her unhappiness with the fact that this was their farewell game on Irish shores, and the press conference was dictated by these questions. She was asked as well, should Pauw stay on, because the contract talks seemed to have stalled, and she responded with, that's not my job to be deciding that. So that was the kind of sense. Vera Pauw once again defended herself bullishly. Couldn't have shot down the allegations with more fervour, I think it's fair to say. And not surprisingly, Sunday papers are reflecting on where we are. We have a profile piece. The Business Post does great profile pieces, and quite often sports people feature, so they've just a profile piece of her exceptional career, you'd have to say, really, as player and manager. Sinead Kassan's writing about it, Shane McGrath's writing about it in the Mail. So
it's everywhere.
I'm curious what's striking you about the coverage of this situation?
Well, first of all, I think it's only natural. There should be big profiles of Irish soccer this weekend, but I would prefer.
Is it soccer or football? Are we going to get?
I call it soccer.
Yeah,
not to confuse it. I'd always
Joe,
call it soccer.
We go.
I'm quite happy to call it soccer.
Okay, we go soccer for the next half an hour. Now on, it's soccer.
So that's there should be profiles. Unfortunately, they're all on Vera Pauw, which is a pity. But this is the nature of how this thing has unfolded, and you'd have to be under a rock not to know what has happened, if you like, in the past. That there was that she was included in a report in America unfairly, in my opinion, and now more.
I can't get it, Tina. I cannot get the hype about this at all. And Shane McGrath was into it. Sorry, you say unfairly. Can you explain that?
Because if you look at that report, sorry, what I mean by that is that if you look I read every page of that report, right? And so there were people in that report who were accused of, physical, sexual, all kinds of abuse of players. I felt that the stuff relating to Pauw, and there were several other people, were not at that level at all. So I thought it was incorrect to be in that.
I'm one clean is saying that, right? So this is Shane McGrath, and we're going between articles here. The most notable aspect of the Athletic article were two allegations of abuse turning physical. One case allegedly involved Pauw grabbing a staff member around the neck and shoving them, but which Pauw said was a case for restraining someone by placing a hand on their shoulder. The second allegedly saw Pauw pull a player by the arm as they tried to resume a running drill the coach was unhappy with. What am I missing here? Is this even worthy of paper? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so
she's
exactly.
a really hot, and the fascinating thing as well, she was one of triplets with two lads and Vera, and her dad is writing to the Dutch FA, and he's saying, we cannot cope with this little girl anymore.
She's 12.
She just wants to play football, so they changed the rules such that she could play with adult sides because she was too young. Can you imagine young Vera Pauw with two football playing brothers who are the other 2/3 of the triplets, and what she's risen to with all her coaching career, as you mentioned, Joe, and all of this? I don't get it at all. I think it's absolute nonsense, but I'm not writing the articles.
But what are you saying? You're saying that the complaints from you're saying the complaints from people in America are nonsense.
It's rubbish.
Okay.
From you're a hardline coach. She's tough. She's granite. She's really, really hard.
Yeah.
Get on with it. I don't get it at all. And I do feel sorry for Katie McCabe, who admits we have our ups and downs relationship. We talk to each other and whatever. But I do feel sorry for Katie McCabe. I don't get this at all. And I don't know why the FAI is allegedly stalling on the deal. Maybe there's more to it than that, but I don't know.
Look,
I think you're in the majority.
Yeah, exactly.
But I
think the fact that the FAI didn't deal with it adequately when initially happened, I think you made this point during the week, Joe, that if they had at the time said, okay, this report has come out that she had abused in some way some players that she was managing in America, let's now do a survey of our players, let them be anonymous. If anybody has a problem with Vera Pauw, let's find out now. And they didn't do that at the time. And I think if they had done that at the time, put it to bed then this wouldn't be interrupting the World Cup preparations. That's the issue I have with it. That's my issue. Look at, these are all features about Pauw and herself. If anybody wants to know what sort of a person she is, I interviewed her, and I don't know her well at all. But
what did you make of her?
What I've made of her several times, and I've seen her at talks and things, I've been very struck by a couple of things. One is she's totally driven. 2, she's extraordinarily high standards. 3, she may not be patient with some people who don't match her things. She's obsessive about injuries in women's sport, the lack of sports science, ACL injuries. Some of the complaints in that original thing that came from America was she won't let us train. Actually came out again in this athletics report. She wouldn't let us do more training. We wanted to train harder. She wouldn't let us. That's because she's obsessively just totally freaked out about ACL injuries in women's sport and how to stop them. So she has particular methods that she uses. She's not one to broker argument in terms of if she believes the science, her version of that science is right, she goes with it. But if you want to know how driven this woman is, and I happened to interview her in the past year about lifestyle because she was promoting exercise for older women. This woman, her favourite thing to do is to cycle up the Tourmalet and the biggest climbs in the Tour de France. She cycles.
I gotta meet Vera.
She cycles 70, 80 kilometres every day of the week. When she worked in Russia for a year, even though it was minus 20 degrees, she went out and cycled. Like, she's obsessive about things, and she's the first person to say, I'm obsessive. But I haven't seen personally. I thought she'd handled the Tyler Toland incident badly. She spoke publicly about a player in public, and I don't think that's the right thing to do. But I haven't heard anything or seen anything. I think there might be one Irish player who would feel that she hasn't been dealt with that fairly. But in terms of everything else, elite sport does demand things. Now, there is an argument that people say, if men do things, if male managers do things badly, that doesn't mean that female managers should do things badly either. And I think that's a fair point. But I think also there is a resilience to expect of players at an international level, that you can be like Katie McCabe and say, yeah, we have arguments. We have arguments all the time because I don't agree with this, and I put it up to her and she takes it back.
Brian Clough was put on an absolute pedestal, right? Rightly or wrongly, and he was flawed. Brian Clough famously boxed Roy Keane in the face, right? Now, I think Brian Clough was partly on the way out at that stage, and Roy Keane was young, and Roy Keane, and that's gone down in legend, right? Vera Pauw grabbed someone by the arm, and we're supposed to write a report about it. Sorry, I don't get it.
But I think if the FAI had dealt with all this at the time, I think they needed to have done something earlier. And unfortunately, this is just interrupting things now. But there's also lots of things like Sinead Kassan's good piece in the Sindo, and she's saying this has distracted from some things that should be far more worthwhile asking. Like, why did they concede 2 goals so quickly against France the last day?
That wasn't great.
That's the sort of stuff we should be talking about. And in fairness, that's the way coverage of women's team sport now has gone, and I'm delighted to see that that's the way it is. It's just been a bit of a distraction that nobody needed, and I think it could have been put to bed earlier, because it's a real he said, she said. It's just that's what it is.
That's what's quite striking about the 2 reports, the Athletic and, well, less so the official report.
The official report,
Vera Pauw is not in the official report, but she's right to reply a lot of the time in the Athletic report. And what's so striking is about, I'd say, the majority of the instances is it's not a case of Pauw, as you would say, Johnny, saying, yeah, that's totally fine though, yeah, I did do that. In quite a lot of the accusations, it's that never happened. It's like complete opposite ends. It's not even, oh no, I did do it that way and they didn't like it, therefore, what can I do? It was, no, that didn't happen. So it was quite a frustrating read. My
cultural thing there too, Joe.
It's definitely cultural. Like, there's no doubt, and we're at the beginnings.
And she says it. She says, I'm Dutch. I'm blunt.
We're at the beginnings of the HR world getting involved in dressing rooms, and that's going to be a weird space for football dressing rooms.
Across all sports.
Yeah,
she has a good.
The point I made during the week, because it kind of blew up in a way I didn't want it to blow up or become as contentious as it became. I am completely sympathetic to everything you say about your sense of the allegations. Like, how could you not be? I'm as well versed as anyone in the way a male British dressing room or Irish dressing room has functioned. So I didn't read the report in December or the Athletic piece and fall off my chair horrified and say, stop everything now. But I said it in December, and then I felt I wished I'd said it louder back then. I said it in the past week, and what I said got turned into me going after Pauw. And I must have said it several times, this is not about Pauw. She should coach any way she wants. She should be as intense as she likes. However, I just think the FAI just need to explain their handling about this a little bit, because, again, appreciating your point about the allegations, at the same time, this was like an official report by serious people who were vouching for the interviews they had done with players and staff. And the line was inappropriate, or a line has been crossed. Now, again, Johnny Ward, Joe Molloy, Cliona Foley, privately, we can just as individual citizens go, what? Like, move on. There's nothing in this. But if you're the head of the FAI, what happened was that report was published, and I'd say within about 90 minutes to 2 hours, there was complete public support of statement, nothing to see here, we don't need to look into this. Like, you wouldn't even have had time to, you at least read the full report. I doubt you would have had time to read the full report in that time.
Report,
and say there was, again, I'm with you
very, very
in many ways. But say you're a 21, 22-year-old and you're like reading the Houston accounts going, oh my God, I actually really feel that way. Are you then going to feel like I can go to the head of the FAI who's just put out a statement given full total backing, and there's a World Cup in 6 months? I'm going to sit, I'll just sit quietly and take it. And my only point was that the FAI it's supposed to be a new era, a grown-up professional organisation, and this was a grown-up report, an official report, admittedly with flaws. But if you're going to be an association that we can all think standards are really high there, we're saying power standards are really high there, then I think you've got to do more than within 2 hours, blanket support, everything fine. Like, what did Pauw say in the Athletic report? They looked me in the eyes and they knew it was all lies. I mean,
good line.
Yeah, but so all I was saying during the week, and I stand by it, is I think most associations, most companies, most entities would have said, look, privately, we think this is fairly soft. This is just a cultural divide. But let's just take 2, 3, 4 days, get someone independent, go talk to the players, come back and tell us.
See if they're unhappy.
It's all great here. What Katie McCabe said, we have arguments, but it's fine. Right? And then we can come out publicly and we can say, we've looked into it.
But it also does give...
And we exonerate Vera Pauw. Everything we know for sure, because we've taken a sample size, everything here is great, and you can trust us, Irish public. We're on top of this, everything's great. And then in 6 months, the Athletic can write a piece, but we all know everything's good. Yeah. Whereas the FAI didn't behave like a grown-up organisation. It rushed to inaction, and it left Pauw open. You know, ironically, they did Pauw a disservice as well, because they left her open to a sense of, well, this hasn't really been addressed. Yeah. Whereas the FAI
and that's
could have
why
addressed
it's coming up again. I know the Athletic, but like,
so
if that has happened,
is that an unfair point? Am I wrong there? Because
no, well, I agree with you. I think if they had done it that way,
I haven't put as much thought into it as that, to be honest. Like, and I do have some sympathy for the FAI. You got to have so much sympathy for the FAI coming back off the FAI that we knew. Everything, it scrutinised about everything. It probably made a bit of a snap decision there and said, we're going to back the manager. Yeah. I think this is so much to do about nothing, that if privately the FAI thought that we're going to back Vera, and I don't think what you're saying there, a 20-year-old player that can relate to this is thinking, am I going to be backed here? I'm not sure if that's much of a thing, to be honest.
Can I say one thing? We are in the era of accountability. We are in that era. Things have changed. Male soccer players in England now come out and say stuff, you know, how they're treated. They don't accept that kind of treatment anymore. And just equally, women are equally entitled to come out and say, we don't accept this stuff anymore. But if the governing body, like there was the issue of, like one of the examples that's come back with the Athletic is over a player that had an eating disorder, and the accusation that she didn't treat this, and there is the possibility that you treat this differently with female athletes, right? Well, actually, I think you should treat that equally with all athletes now, because men are just as prone to eating disorders.
Women have kids, women have periods.
Like, it's not there's a lot of stuff there. Exactly, it isn't different. So what I'm saying is that there may be other sensitivities here, but I think if the FAI just had put it to bed then, asked the players, anybody got problems, whatever, which I'm sure that they do internally all the time, because you know they have to be accountable and they have to be taken. The best care has to be given to these players.
Why would they not give her
another contract? She may not be perfect. No, but I don't think any manager is perfect, and there will be players that they clash with.
But that's totally fine.
Yes.
And like, again, to stress, like, did the Irish rugby team love Joe Schmidt? Did they think he would, like, again, could you make parallels with
there'd be loads of managers where you say, if you came back now, what would the players say about you?
Let me put it this way. If some organisation that Joe Schmidt had worked for before came out with an official report and we all thought it was guff, would the IRFU not have at least done something? That's my only point on that. And it's a point of principle. It's not
and I'll make another point about Pauw. One of the first times I heard her speak was on a panel. She wasn't in Ireland long, and it was very interesting what she said, because she was talking about her history, like as a player. Obviously she played a lot, then she managed a lot internationally, and somebody said to her, you know, would you like to work in the men's game? And she took serious umbrage at that, right? And she bristles, you know, sometimes she does bristle. Sometimes she's very, in fact, as an international manager, she's probably very reasonable with the press. She doesn't get upset too often, but she actually bristled, and she said, I deliberately didn't. I got offered jobs in the men's game, but she said, if all the good women leave the women's game, then what are we doing to the women's game? How can the women's game develop? It needs women in the women's game who understand female physiology, particular issues that are particular to female players. So she said, actually, I have deliberately chosen to stay in the women's game. Now that, as I said, I'm not saying her coaching is perfect. I'm not saying she doesn't clash with players. I'm not saying she's not blunt and tough on players, because we know she is, and she says she is.
And that's fine.
Yeah, but I did think that was interesting that she took that to heart, because she does feel very passionately about the need to address the lack of science and the lack of, you know, specialist intricacies that need to be done in the women's game, even based purely on physiology.
I once went out with one of 5 sisters. I only went out with one of them, and
very intimate here.
The dad used to say, to them, "Will you toughen up? Will you?" Right? And I think there's an element of this here. Like, I mean, Vera Pauw, she might be a tough coach, but like, let's get on with it. You're playing at elite level of sport here, like, and
you know what, Johnny? My suspicion is, if the FAI had taken that sample size of the Irish dressing room, it would have been
exactly.
That's where.
It's an American.
That's what I'm saying, is that the culture in America is different. And like, when she was in America, like, she actually had, and it might not have been wise, but like she said, Europeans and Americans, we do things differently, and certainly the bluntness, I think, would not go well with
so
with
here's a question:
some American players.
Are you telling me in the 2 hours, and maybe it takes 45 minutes to write a statement? Are you telling me the FAI board took account of all of those things in
obviously
that time?
Not.
That's my only point.
Immediacy was obviously at its
a rush to an action.
Yeah, but I will. I think the FAI is really doing a really good job since the Delaney days. I think it's doing a good job. It's far from flawless, but given the situation it inherited and the lack of confidence across the board, I think in general it's doing a pretty good job. And maybe this was one of the times where it could have done something a little bit better.
And that's fine too, by the way. That doesn't mean they can't be above reproach.
I think people, if people are looking just to even get some insight into her and her background, the Shane McGrath piece is very good. Good piece by Emmett, Ryan and Ellie Dan. There's a load of good features on her there that you'll get some, like the headline in the Mail probably sums it up best: hiding in plain sight. Vera Pauw has always been unashamedly herself, passionate, determined, forthright, and absolutely certain in her beliefs. And that, I think, is, from my observation of her, I'd say that might be her weakness, is that she won't back down. And even on the science stuff, which some people would argue with her on, she's convinced she's right, and she's writing a book on that whole piece, ACL and periodization with women's fitness.
It's to her great credit, both in December, because she could have cancelled a bunch of media interviews on the Friday after the report, and this press conference. Unlike, because again, sorry, I'm not saying the FAI are in crisis or anything, but we sent an email to the FAI just going, did you talk to players in the back of this report? And the reply was, we're looking forward to the World Cup, we can't wait. Which was a simple question. In fairness to her, ask me anything, I'll stay here for the full half hour. And she's done it, like, that's very admirable, because if you'd something to hide, you might be, I'll do a 5-minute thing. And
the FAI is a slightly convoluted communication department as well, so like, I'm not sure what happened there, but I mean, they shouldn't have sent that back, obviously.
That was their answer.
But it remains their answer. It was their answer last week as well, wasn't it? When the Athletic article came out, it was their answer as well, as we've dealt with this, we stand by it, and
nothing
everything.
To see here.
And look, whenever we qualify for a major tournament of any kind, even over the next few weeks, and let's hope we get some great action, but with the Women's World Cup, whenever we have an Irish team involved, there is obviously, in some elements, a cheerleading element, but as journalists you do have to ask hard questions, and organisations have to ask hard questions so that everybody is sure and clear that everything is done. But like, if you look at the way the Irish women were treated, and they stood up, those brave women who stood up for themselves, they went out in business class to Australia. Pauw has insisted that everything is done the best possible way for them.
Well, to the 4 million people who tweeted me saying, what's your problem with a coach coaching? I don't have any problem with that. It was purely and 100% an FAI point and a 0% Vera Pauw point. But
you're saying you were wrong?
No.
Joe Brolly on it.
Sorry, I hope I have not backed down from my FAI point. I stand by it.
I agree with the FAI point. I agree with the FAI point. It would have absolutely cleared it,
They're looking for 300 million taxpayers' money or whatever it is. They need to be a grown-up organisation.
Joe, the country is, we have so much corporate tax income. Just throw money at everything. I mean, just throw money at everything, I'm telling you. We've so much corporate tax rate, just throw it at everything.
Okay, by the way, I do suspect, and rightly so, the football's really going to take over now, and fever pitch will come in, and when these games start happening, I think it will be parked, is my sense. I don't feel like it's going to hang over the situation.
You think they come into camp, their set press conferences, it had to be raised because the Athletic article came out this week.
Monday,
I do want to mention Dave Kelly's piece as well, if we
very nice piece.
He talks
to would you have known Shane Keogh?
Cliona asked me this, and this is quite alarming. Now, I might have had a lapse year or two following Galway United where I don't really remember Shane that well. But as I said to Cliona, I remember his uncle well, right? So I started to feel old because Ollie Keogh, his uncle, would have been a very good player for Galway United. He's mentioned in the piece, and if I do quote just Dave Kelly, this is typical Dave, it's all about Shane. I saw a tweet and reached out to him. So I thought this is a lovely way to actually write an article. I saw a tweet, and then you get this lovely piece which is in both the Sunday World, and if I show it here on page 13, and you see Back from the Brink, and then you have the backdrop of the sea, which is presumably the Atlantic Ocean, and that's very significant in the piece. There's been a lot of tragedy in Shane Keogh's family, as has been referenced, and there's no crap in the piece at all. It's Back from the Brink. We get a lot of these articles about, like, you know, I suffer from depression, it's good to talk, you know, it's okay not to feel okay, and you can't like just render these things solved by these, you know, little catchphrases that solve everything. So it's there's a lot more to it than that, and this piece I think just sums up the mental health sort of issues that people have, and the fact that Shane he confronts them, and he says, you know, he scored this goal 11 years ago in Richmond Park, but then he misses a penalty recently before he gives up the drink, and Dave kind of surmises that his head wasn't right. Now he's in a great shape. He goes sea swimming, he loves his life and all of that. And what I thought was a really lovely piece as well in terms of the hope for the future. He's contemplating going back playing League of Ireland because he's still of an age. You see him in the piece, he looks fresh out by the beautiful Galway coastline, and he just goes on about Coonwera. Like when you think of like St. John of God's or Coonwera, these places, this thought of dread comes into your head. Imagine having to go there. And he just says, you know, about Coonwera, with my addiction to drink and drugs hitting rock bottom and now finding out so much about life, I thought it would be a junkie place. So many people there are now my best friends, genuine, caring people. They're brilliant for me. They're on the same journey, and we can always reach out to each other. I'm forever grateful to Coonwera. It changed my life completely. It didn't just cure my addiction, it transformed me as a person. And I'm firmly of the belief, like, a person doesn't have a drinking problem. He has problems he's trying to escape by drinking. And I think the likes of what this article explains to you, if you have issues and you know you have issues, you can go to places, and talking actually might get you through it. And Shane just says that it's changed him as a person. Beautiful piece from Dave Kelly in the Sindo and Sunday World.
It's interesting though, like the word junkie, I hate it. It's so pejorative.
Yeah, 100%.
It's so dismissive, and even he accidentally uses it there, whereas the word alcoholic doesn't carry anything like the same kind of judgment. Do you know what I mean? And that's what he was, and that's what he's talking about here, and how he's recovered from alcohol, and only 8 months he's free of drink, you know. And Coonwera, of course, it seems to crop up time and time again in these articles, Joe, where there's so few facilities in Ireland for people to recover from addictions, so few of them, and Coonwera started in Carlow, is in Galway as well. It's just one of those places, and everybody you ever read, whoever goes into them dreading it, comes out saying what an amazing place, what amazing people, you know.
He sits upon, I presume this is where you have the rocky shorelines of Galway, but Dave's piece, Keogh sits upon the same rock as he did all those months ago when he was contemplating jumping off, and the story goes, there's a lady walking along, and I think she's walking her dog, and she sees him, and that sounds like, it's kind of a bit of Holly movie, yes, but actually that's true. That's what happens, and
she snapped him out of it.
And I just love this piece. I think it's one of some cracking pieces in the Sindo today, and this is the best of them.
It seems there was quite a bit of bereavement in his life, and that led to the addiction, is the sense of it. He hadn't really talked it through. He got the opportunity to do that at Coonwera. What I love is somebody talking about life in these terms now, the way he talks about life, because he admits, like, a lot of mistakes. You know, he split up with his girlfriend, 6 months of chaos, crashed a car, he was caught drink driving, the suicide attempts, he rode off the car. That was my life.
This is only a paragraph.
Yeah, and he uses the word contented now, which is just great, because he played recently with Athenry, and they played in a Connacht final, and he scored a penalty, and he said he went to the pub afterwards with the team, and he had an orange, and then he says he drove home to a contented sleep. He said, and this is the beautiful way we should all be aspiring to live as much as anything, my life is full of peace and tranquility. It's beyond my wildest dreams. I have no lavish material possessions, but I have what I need. I sleep soundly. I wake up every morning knowing my life is manageable because I'm living it. I've never known a peace of mind like it. Not even when I was a kid. Everything is clear. I don't need to avoid people because I've nothing to hide. I'm not scared. You're like,
and it takes a good writer to know to let somebody speak like that as well. Do you know what I mean? And to get that.
And it's an evolving story as well. Let's hope this continues.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
like there's no Hollywood ending at this early in life, and I hope, Shane, that because this is just a beautiful piece. Gives hopes to everyone, really.
The one I liked was Jack. There's another one, a good piece in the Cinder, Joe.
Oh yeah, tell us about it. Yeah.
Just Jack Marley, one of the boxers. I mean, the boxers came home from the Europeans last week with medals. And
should I have heard of Jack Marley?
The great thing was, well, no, not really. Sean McGoldrick has a lovely piece with him. He's from Sallynoggin. Sallynoggin. What's unique about him is, well, unusual about him is that not since Carl O'Grady in '96 have we had a heavyweight qualify for the Olympics.
So he did qualify.
Yeah, he's got the Olympic place, which is fantastic, right? But what's interesting, it's a really, really nice feature, really well done. But what I think it makes it particularly pertinent to what we were talking about earlier is that he's the first one to qualify from his club, from the Monkstown club, right? On several occasions last year, Marley and other members of the club trained outside the offices of Dunleary Rathdown County Council to highlight their plight after being locked out of their training facilities. And this is the thing about the need to invest in boxing again, where people, where we need to put money in. It changes lives, it changes areas, and that's linked to John Green's piece in the Sunday Independent. But the other thing that really interests me in this is, and this is why it proves why when you lose people, good people, they're lost, is he wasn't convinced he was good enough until Bernard Dunn said to him, "You're good enough to come in."
Right.
And Bernard Dunn was the one who called him into the high performance and said to him, "You're a good enough kid, come in here." I think it was 4 weeks before he was due to sit his leaving cert in 2002. He's only 20. Bernard Dunn invited him to join the Irish squad, and he was putting together a squad for the under-22s. Like you need good people in a sport at that high elite level that spot talent, and then will go and have the human touch and go and tell people, you could do it.
I was up watching the Nicholas Roach yearly bike race. It's in a kind of almost like a housing estate, kind of not that far from Dundrum, and so like some of the characters in the crowd. Annalise Murphy was there,
cycling a lot these days.
A serious cyclist. If she wants to turn pro, like, go ahead, she's a monster. But there was Mick Dowling across from me, and Mick Dowling's son was cycling. I'm pretty sure it was Mick Dowling's grandson. There were the three generations. You need good people, like Mick Dowling's role in boxing, and you need that kind of it's absolutely true. It was a beautiful experience, and that got me thinking of Mick Dowling and Irish boxing and all that. So he will now go on the carding scheme because he won a medal at Europeans as well. So that again will affect all that vital stuff that you need to get into the elite end of your sport and stay in it. And there is that guy that's came over to Ireland all those years ago that's like the king of Irish boxing. Zar.
He's by all accounts top
world class.
Yeah. We're out of time. Thank you both so much. That was great. Cliona Foley and Johnny Ward. What a dream team. Come back in 6 months, Johnny.
Thanks, guys.
The last time, I do want to admit this, the last time I was on, I was at a stag the day before. It wasn't you, it was with John Duggan. I was like, never again. It was a mile stag, a Dublin stag. I went home at 11:30. But if you do have like a Negroni and then you have another Negroni and then you're whatever, I was like, never again. So this was a lovely experience for both.
Oh, well, listen.
By comparison.
Thank you. We'll take a short break. Tommy Welch is at Croke Park. He's going to join us next.
Off the Ball on News Talk. News Talk Breakfast.
Should adult children pay rent to their parents? Jen Hogan, Irish Times columnist, gave us her take.
I know it's always a little bit